Welcome. Hello, everybody. We are back with another episode of Share Your Experience here with Reality Sandwich. Today, I am joined by Christy, a new friend of mine, I'm hoping, as we get to know each other a bit here today. Christy, thank you for joining me. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you here today.
Yes. Hi, Holly. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Christy Nault. I am a root cause health practitioner, a breathwork facilitator, and I'm also the founder, formulator, and CEO of Microflow, which is a psilocybin microdosing supplement company. And yeah, I feel like my whole life really opened me up to being curious about psychedelics, and I always knew there were some big missing holes in the holistic health conversation. I've always been very um, into what a lot of people may call the taboo. And I learned from a very young age that our traditional medical system and just traditional modern therapy wasn't it. At least it was not it for my family. I come from a family with three children, and from a very young age, I watched my brother suffer at the hands of Western medicine. So he was severely vaccine injured at a very young age, and it really just changed the trajectory of his life and of our family's life really overnight. So my brother developed the most severe case of epilepsy in a single night that doctors had ever witnessed. He was having like 350 grand mal seizures a day. He went through over 13 failed brain surgeries and just a lot of medical gaslighting we'd be sitting here all day to go through that story. But I've always been really interested in the brain and in the nervous system, just growing up around that environment. And he ended up passing away in 2015. And really just the shock and the grief of that opened me up in so many ways. It was the major catalyst for a spiritual awakening for myself. And it was also like the trauma was a catalyst for my journey with chronic illness. And so much of my journey with chronic illness can be traced back to really severe chronic nervous system dysregulation from such a young age. A lot of the people who work in the same industry as me, we got into this space because we were suffering. We had to heal ourselves and show other people how to do it. But a lot of other people's stories, I feel like, starts with a childhood of being on a ton of like antibiotics and, ruining their gut at a young age. And that just wasn't really part of my story. A lot of my issues were rooted in chronic nervous system dysregulation. And it just became so apparent that, after already basically a decade of working in the holistic health space, when that happened, when my brother passed away, I was eating all the right foods. I was exercising consistently, doing all the detox supplements, doing quote unquote all the right things. I was meditating. I was doing breath work. Like I understood the ins and outs of the nervous system, but I guess I didn't really understand the depth of which our subconscious and subconscious wounds can really manifest as physical symptoms. So I was very curious about psychedelics for a really long time. My mom was a really avid researcher for my brother growing up, and she was even into trying to get him to do medical marijuana at a young age, right? And this was back in like the early 90s. So I came from a very open-minded family. And then just being in the space of health and spirituality and listening to podcasts all the time, I heard a lot of people tell their stories about things like mushrooms and ayahuasca. And I was always so intrigued from in the deepest part of me. But I also understood the concept of letting the medicine call to you. So I probably researched and listened to other stories for at least 7 years before I finally explored on my own. And it was early 2020, so not that long ago. And it was just a very distinct call. I was in my car driving, wasn't waking up thinking I want to start working with psychedelics today, but I got this very clear download that it's time to find a really great source of psilocybin and to start with a microdose. And it just so happened that the day that message came in, the place that I was driving to, that person offered me. They're like, have you ever been interested like in mushrooms? Or it was just so beautiful and divine timing, really. So I got my microdose that day, and it honestly, like that very first dose, I know a lot of people say this with like large doses, and I've done other psychedelics that, maybe we can talk about in larger doses as well, but it truly has been microdosing that has completely shifted my nervous system, my health, my business, my reality, my relationships in every which way. And I'm so grateful for it, which obviously went on, launched my own company because I knew everyone else needed to experience this as well.
Oh wow, thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry to hear about your brother, and I have been so disappointed by Western medicine and some of my own healing journeys, and have watched that happen with others around me and my family too. And I think a lot of times when we talk about psychedelics for health purposes, aside from maybe spiritual growth and things like that, a lot of times we're talking about mental health. And sometimes I think people forget about the physical healing that can happen through the use of psychedelics, whether that sometimes is in large doses or subtle doses. Can you talk a little bit more about maybe some of the physical connection and healing or awareness that comes through psilocybin use or other
Mm-hmm.
psychedelic practices?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I think if we can start to understand that when it comes to our health, our nervous system is 100% absolutely the foundation on which everything else is built upon. So, like I said, you could have a perfect diet, you could be doing quote unquote all the right things, but if your nervous system is a wreck, your health is it's a huge crack in your health foundation, right? So, you know, I specialize in hormones and autoimmunity and so many other things. And when people come to me with hormone issues, a lot of people are like, I'm dealing with endometriosis or PCOS or PMDD, right? I need to fix my hormones. And when in actuality, I'm like, your sex hormones are just a reflection of your foundational hormones. Hormone issues are just very, very downstream. So in order to fix our hormones, we have to address the real issues that are upstream. So that's, I would call myself a root cause health practitioner. In order to truly heal, we have to get to the physical, emotional, and spiritual roots of why we became ill in the first place. So back to the example of like hormone issues, if someone's dealing with, let's say, endometriosis, which is very rooted in estrogen dominance, among a bunch of other things as well, we have to get to those look at the foundational hormones being our cortisol, right? So our stress hormone. So if our nervous system is super chronically dysregulated, if we have a lot of repressed and unprocessed trauma, we're going to have very dysregulated cortisol as well, right? And our circadian rhythm. So that's very involved. It's not I feel like people kind of fall in two camps where I was actually a personal trainer for 13 years as well. So I was very surrounded by like what I call the metabolic bros, where everything is just very physical, right? Like it's fitness, it's exercise, it's calories in, calories out. That's health, period. And like, that's obviously we know that's not true. And then I've also been in the camp of like around a lot of energy healers where people think we just can completely heal with like Reiki. And I don't, disagree. I've seen a lot of things, a lot of healing happen with, energy work. But I always say we're multidimensional beings and and our health requires multidimensional solutions. So, our healing really is composed of the physical, the physiological, the structural, the emotional, the subconscious, the spiritual, the ancestral, right? But when we can use something like psilocybin, especially in microdoses, because I think the big doses are wonderful, and I'm sure you hear wonderful stories all day from people you interview, but I work primarily with women, and I work with a lot of women who have a history similar to myself. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s where we as women were told to be as skinny as possible. We ate fat-free and low-cal, and we were so freaking undernourished for so long. Our minerals have been depleted. Like we are just like, there's nothing to run on. And our systems require energy. Our nervous system requires energy, right, to be able to run properly. So I see sometimes that when people dive immediately into big doses with psychedelics or dive immediately into their deepest, darkest trauma healing, that they can quite frankly like blow a fuse in their circuitry of their nervous system because there just isn't enough resourcing or capacity within the body or within the nervous system to be able to actually hold all of that and metabolize it and process it, and integrate it, right? So I really think that like when we use smaller doses, we can create more capacity and threshold within the nervous system to be able to hold bigger emotional things. But through that process as well, we're allowing all of our systems to just turn online and operate the way they were designed to. When our nervous system is not locked in fight or flight, right? Like our body is going to work the way it was designed to. So much physical healing. I mean, I could go on and on with that, but I think the main answer here is just the nervous system is the foundation of everything. And when you can heal the nervous system, you're going to see improvements in every other area of your health and body.
I really love how much when I was like looking around your site and reading about cycle syncing and how you do talk a lot about women's health and hormones, because I think this has been coming up a lot more. But I mean, up until, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, I didn't even understand that my own cycle had these phases. I didn't understand that men and women literally exist on a different hormonal scale, and that women are not designed to, I think how your site said it was, we're not meant to be the same and operate the same every day throughout the entire month.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit more about that and the difference between men and women? Because I think the importance here is that, particularly as we see more and more psychedelics being studied, we know from pharmaceutical industry, most trials historically have always been done on men.
Yes.
And I really want to be conscious as women are researching psilocybin and other things to try for themselves, that they recognize like, hey, consider you and your physiology. So talk to me a little bit about those different rhythms and why we should be acknowledging them.
I love this question. Thanks for asking this. So yes, men and women are biologically entirely different human beings. I always like to teach this by saying men are the sun and women are the moon. So men's bodies operate entirely according to our circadian rhythm, which is our internal 24-hour biological clock. Men and women have a circadian rhythm, but women also have a secondary internal biological clock called the infradian rhythm, which actually more heavily dictates our health outcomes. So just like the sun rises and the sun sets in the exact same manner every 24 hours, right? You wake up, the sun rises, you're 7 p.m., the sun's going down. That's how a man's hormones operates. Like they're just the same every day. And that's wonderful for them. This doesn't mean that one is better than the other. We're just completely different. And women, on the other hand, if you go out every night when it's pitch black out and you look up at the sky and you look up at the moon for about a 29.5-day cycle, which is like the length of the lunar phase, which is also about the length of our full menstrual cycle. The moon looks different every single day. Sometimes it's, just a little sliver, and then it gets bigger and bigger and it gets smaller. And the moon is waning and waxing and going through these different phases. And that is exactly how our hormones work as women. So when we say the word your cycle, most people just are like, oh yeah, I have a cycle. I have a period, right? So they're just actually familiar with just one phase of that cycle. When we're talking about your cycle, the cycle is an entire month long with 4 distinct phases every single month. So just like Mother Earth, just like nature goes through 4 seasons, spring, summer, fall, and winter every single year, we as women go through 4 distinct seasons every single month within our own body. We are literally nature embodied. And when we can attune our exercise, our nutrition, our socialization, our work, we can sync anything to our cycle. But when we can start to attune to those energetic differences throughout the different phases of our personal cycle, we're going to be much more attuned to the natural rhythms of our nervous system as well. So a lot of people are burning out their nervous system. I always say we can't just like breath work and meditate and EFT tap our way to a healthier nervous system. Those are all great tools. But if you're trying to run through the world operating like a man, showing up the same every single day without being aware of the differences that we go through. I mean, if we think of like the different seasons, right? And we literally go through these in our body as well. But spring is the time where like things are waking up and, things are beginning to bloom and there's more energy and there's more color. And summer, there's just like, it's a month of fertility. Like there's so much abundance of food. And, even when you look around, people are more, people want to be out and socializing and with friends. And it's just like peak sun, AKA peak energy on the planet because the sun powers everything. Then we transition into autumn and things start to die. Like that is there's the only truth on this planet, right? Is like, there's always a death and a rebirth. And, we literally go through death and rebirth every month in our body. And that kind of death, that shedding starts to happen after we ovulate. So after we ovulate, we start to get into our inner autumn season, and that's what we call our luteal phase. And that's like the 11-ish days before we actually get our period. And menstruation is our inner winter, right? That's the time for like hibernation, reflection. It is a physical and metaphorical death. And when we allow ourselves to be more still during that inner winter or menstrual time, not only are we physically shedding, but we are energetically shedding all of the excess stress hormones, all of, perhaps the unprocessed emotions that happened in the past month. We give ourselves that opportunity to release. It is a beautiful release. And once we get over menstruation, it's springtime again in our body and we feel that energy again and we can start to create more potently. But if we kind of ignore the phases that our body's supposed to be going through, we're going to burn out and we're not going to be operating at our peak. So it's really important to just be aware of our female physiology, really.
I love that. I mean, one of the joys of being able to work from home and kind of for myself is that I'm able to honor that a little bit more. The first day of my cycle, if I need to sleep in or be in a hot bath all day, like I can carve out space for that. And I try to be very intentional about those things. But one thing I had not even considered, I guess, was I microdose back and forth with psilocybin and LSD. I like them both. They're different. They work in different ways, but I, tend to alternate. But I never thought about how I could incorporate or think about microdosing with my cycle. Do you actually have any recommendations for how to think about either dosage or frequency in relation to cycles?
So I think that we can really benefit from microdosing all month long, but Microflow, my microdosing blends, I actually created the first cycle syncing microdosing blends on the market. So rather than shifting like the dose or the frequency, I shift the herbs that I infuse into the psilocybin. So for example, in our inner spring and inner summer, so follicular and ovulatory phases, my blend is called Exude. It's all about like radiating outward, right? And that blend has lion's mane and cacao in addition to psilocybin. So cacao is a really heart-opening blend, but it's also like, often you use it in social circles, and it's really about like projecting your heart and that outward expression. And then in the luteal and menstrual phase, my blend is called Surrender. So it's psilocybin, lion's mane, and rose petal. And rose petal is also very heart softening, but it brings you more inward. And rose petal is a deeply feminine plant. It also holds the highest vibrational frequency of any plant on the entire planet. It is basically the living embodiment of the same vibrational frequency as love. And during our luteal and menstrual phases really is that time that we need to give ourselves that extra amount of self-love, because that's the time when our shadow is illuminated, right? So it's more of that inward time. And when we're inward, we can kind of bump up on some of those uncomfy feelings that maybe we were just kind of too out and about and busy to realize what was happening internally during the beginning of our cycle. But then a lot of, some of those shadows get initiated and revealed and illuminated in the second half of our cycle. And the rose, actually, in my opinion, this is why I used it, but I feel like the rose petal infused with the psilocybin helps us really be with those in a very loving way. I say it like it helps us see those harder emotions through kind of rose-colored goggles, so through the lens of love. So it doesn't have to feel so challenging, right? When we meet it with love, and we can actually, when we surrender to those emotions, we can move through them so much more quickly. Like the challenge actually more arises when we resist them and we're trying to escape them and try to fix them instead of just like being with them, loving them, learning from them, and then we can just more easily transmute that. So yeah, I don't know, like in my experience, I have tried when I was initially creating the blends, like does it make a difference if it's different doses? And I found that not to be true. I just found like what we blend with it can actually make such a huge difference.
I like that. I like that you're formulating products in a holistic way rather than just psilocybin. There you go. I like that entourage effect for sure. Okay, so take me back to, I want to hear about a psychedelic experience of yours, whether it's with psilocybin or another substance. I'd like to hear about a memorable experience that really maybe changed your outlook or set you out on the course of the life you're living now.
Okay. Yeah, I think like for me, psilocybin just has been, it's my medicine. And I've had much more powerful experiences with microdoses. And honestly, I think it's because it's like you're living your daily life. So in real time, it's like you're fixing things, right? You're not in the middle of like a jungle, that's amazing too. Love that. But you're having this big experience in the middle of the jungle, and then, it takes weeks to integrate, where like when you're microdosing, you're actually integrating in real time. So what I can share is just like my first 3 months of my very first microdosing experience. I feel like that would be a really cool story. And it seems like a lifetime ago now, because honestly, I'm living in a completely different reality. So I struggled with basically lifelong history of an eating disorder, had anorexia from a really young age. That was kind of like living in a very chaotic environment with everything that was happening with my brother. My form of survival was perfectionism. So it was perfect grades, perfect thriving athlete. I needed to have the perfect body, right? So like for me, I've always lived in this like suffocating grip of just debilitating perfectionism, and eating disorders were a big part of that for me. So kind of like went in and out of eating disorders basically my whole life. And that was actually, I wasn't drawn to psilocybin to heal an eating disorder. That wasn't even in my awareness, but healing from the grips of like my self-imposed, my own mental prison and this perfectionism, that was something I was looking to break free from. So I can say within like the first 3 weeks of my microdosing protocol, I had healed an eating disorder. Like I didn't even seek out to do this, but it was like, whoa, like, wow, my body wants me to eat this now. And I don't look in the mirror and see a completely different person. And so that really, opened up so much healing for me as well, because in order to heal our physical bodies, we have to be deeply nourished women, right? So healed an eating disorder in a matter of weeks that like had this death grip on me literally my whole life since I was probably in 6th grade, even younger. I remember going on my very first diet in kindergarten. So so that was quite incredible. And I was living in a lot of scarcity. I feel like the biggest life-changing thing for me when it came to microdosing psilocybin is the way it allowed me to align my life with so much abundance and truly create financial abundance for myself as well. So when I started microdosing, I was 6 figures in credit card debt. And my very first year of microdosing, I built a thriving 7-figure business. I quit my job, started a business, and like it really changed my entire life. And it wasn't, I've always been creative. I've always had creative ideas, but then it was like the aligned action part that I had so much fear because of like this perfectionism. So when I started microdosing, I would have these creative hits like I always had. And then instead of like festering, like, oh my God, can I do this? Back and forth, it was just like, we do it, right? Like we just do it. And yes, was I still a little scared? I was still a little scared, but it's like the psilocybin kind of dissolved the fear barriers that were previously preventing me from taking those aligned actions and really putting myself out there and really just like sharing my medicine with the world and shining bright and taking up space. So it really changed my health with the eating disorder. It changed my entire business. Like I said, I had been working as a personal trainer basically since college, and it was great for the time, in the beginning. And then it expired. Like I grew out of it, but that was my primary form of income, right? A lot of my clients had been with me for like 10 plus years. And the psilocybin basically gave me the courage to like actually cut off something that no longer aligned with my soul, even though I didn't know what was next, right? Now people see me and I have these thriving like online programs and I do retreats. And obviously now I have the supplement company and on and on and on. But at that point, like there really wasn't a next step. I just knew that I needed to end what was no longer aligned. And as soon as I did that, it's like the next idea came in. Cool, I could take action on it. Okay, cool. I attracted like my soul aligned. I was attracting much better caliber of like women as well. People who were also ready to do the work. People who didn't want to be in these like codependent healer type relationships. I feel like there's a lot of like codependency in like the healing space where people think they need a healer to heal them, and then the healer wants to like keep the people forever and think that like you need me, right? So I knew that I just wanted to show people what was possible. My business is completely built around teaching people how to become their own self-healers. And I was able to just stay really true in that energy and then call in people who were ready to do the work. And and then just started calling in like new friendships. And I have wonderful friends from college, and I'll be friends with them probably forever. But not everyone was like growing and evolving in the same capacity that I was. And as soon as I started showing up as my truest self, even online on Instagram, it's like, oh, cool. The people can actually see who I am. And I started calling in like new best friends. And the psilocybin just truly was the catalyst for so many things. So much of my life, it was really easy for me to hold pain. I think a lot of us can relate, right? If we grew up with trauma, with chaos, with pain, our nervous system continues to seek what's familiar in life. So even if it's not what's best for us, our nervous system is wired for one thing and one thing only, which is safety. But safety to our nervous system simply means what's familiar. So if you grew up with scarcity, if you grew up with chaotic relationships, right, you're going to like keep seeking that. And what was really hard for me to actually hold in my body, in my life, was joy. Even though like I was in a really beautiful marriage, it's like, I don't know, my body, my nervous system never allowed me to fully, excuse me, fully surrender to like, it's safe to be happy. Like the rug isn't going to get pulled from under you. So I always say like my first 3 months was like bliss codes. Like I just, whoa, like this is how people feel on this planet. Like people can actually be this happy. And it was just such a wild experience to just feel pure bliss, to feel my heart for probably like the first time. So much of my life I was judging myself and striving and like, I'm only good enough if, right? There was a lot of these conditions, and I was able to just merge with what true unconditional love is for myself, and therefore it reflected deeper in other relationships because that's how it worked. So that, first 3 months of microdosing, when I really started changing my business and my ability to make money and be more confident, heal an eating disorder, feel more bliss, it also in that process completely transformed my marriage. My wife started microdosing with me probably like a month after she saw a lot of the changes with me. And I just kind of look back and laugh because I just remember some of those initial first months where, you have your role in relationships and, sometimes you kind of like bicker about the same things. And I just remember when we both were microdosing, there became this like spaciousness in our conversations that instead of reacting the same way that we would always react in the past, it was like there was like this buffer. And then I was able to really see where she was coming from. She was, even if we didn't fully agree, she was able to really see where I was coming from. And there were times where we'd actually just sit there and laugh and be like, remember how we used to react in the past? And like, so it really allowed kind of like a brand new relationship to be built. We've been together for over 12 years now. And I would say like and obviously that's growth in time as well, but like microdosing truly has been the greatest game changer for just having such a happy, peaceful, co-creative home together. So much deep support. So gosh, I could probably go on and on and on about just those first 3 months, but it really just kind of pulled the veil back for me of this is what we've always been taught that you need to do to succeed, right? Like go to school, get married, have this job, or if you used to like, when I used to have creative ideas and you would go tell like maybe your parents or a friend and they'd be like, well, how are you going to do that? Right? It's like the microdosing helped me be so sure in myself that I didn't need these outside opinions anymore. And now I know, like, don't ask advice from people who aren't living the life you genuinely want to live. So it really just helped me like, oh, I had this idea. I don't need to go ask 5 people and get their approval first and see if it's okay. Like, I'm just going to do it because I know what's aligned with like my higher self, and my higher self is co-creating with the medicine and leading the way. So I always felt held and protected, and yes, it was epic. And I'm like, well, obviously I need to share this with every single person I know. And I just noticed so many of like I said, I had been in the healing space for so long already. I'd been doing the meditations, the retreats, the breath works, literally all of the things. And the way in such a short amount of time that the microdoses of psilocybin basically brought all my shadows to light, because psilocybin is an illuminator, right? As much as it's going to illuminate the love and the connectivity and the gratitude and the bliss codes and all those great things I was talking about, it's also going to illuminate our shadows, and it's going to make the unconscious conscious, which is such an incredible gift because like I always tell my students in my community now, we can't heal what we're unaware of, and about 97% of what we're dealing with in our life is dictated by our subconscious, being below our conscious awareness. We don't even know that that's there, right? So for me, growing up, there was, a lot of trauma, and I never really fully got into all of this in our conversation today. But because of that, my body's intelligent. A lot of, we're all incredibly intelligent, our bodies. And my body protected me by blocking off memories. So I essentially had no memories under the age of like 25 years old, which was crazy. I mean, yes, I had some, but like it's like kind of like this whole blank space. And the microdosing actually started to bring back a lot of my memories as well. And what was really beautiful was when I think of childhood, as much as like, from the outside, people were like, you were an elite athlete, you traveled all the time for sports, you were a straight A student, like things were good for you, because a lot of people didn't know what was actually going on. For me, when I think of my childhood, I think my childhood was trauma. It was dark. It was hard. But when some of these memories started coming back up, I actually started to have like these glimmers, like, wow, it wasn't all so bad. Like, I started to have really beautiful memories come up as well, which I feel like is important to note, because I think a lot of people have fear of when you talk about like the subconscious being illuminated, that it's all going to be scary, bad, dark thing that's going to like knock you out and you're not going to be able to handle it. And I really don't believe that the medicine will show us what we're not ready to handle. And, you know, working with something like psilocybin to illuminate our shadow is an amazing thing, because the shadow is not all like the quote unquote bad stuff, the traumatic stuff. The shadow is just, it's also all of the things that we have not yet tapped into, like our untapped and our unrealized gifts, right? So for me, it was like, wow, I didn't know I was so capable to get up in front of big rooms, thousands of people, and speak and teach and just be operating at this level of life and relationship and business as I was. And like, that was kind of all festering in my shadow too. It wasn't all of like my trauma, but the medicine did. It helped me really work through decades of trauma really fast. I'm not saying that it has to be fast. We're all at our own pace and our own journey. But that was just my experience. It was a very accelerated experience. And in addition to tapping into some of like, some of the more challenging things, it was like, these are all your gifts that you haven't realized yet. So really just incredible. And that's like 3 months, right? So I could go on and on for after, but yeah, I'll leave it there for now.
That's fantastic. And psilocybin is a great illuminator. And so I think your point about microdosing versus taking maybe larger trip level doses is so important for people to understand, because of course we live in a society where we want a pill, we want a powder, we want to instantly fix something. That's just the world that we live in. Make it quick, make it fast, let's move on. And that's not how microdosing necessarily is. You don't take your first dose and it's like, okay, like I'm good to go. But it does have that walk, like you mentioned, of like, I feel like when I'm microdosing, it's not that my problems are gone, but it's easier for me to know how to navigate them. Like, I can see this roadblock and I know if I need to go around or over or underneath it, rather than, well, I guess I better start chiseling my way through this. Who knows how long it will take? That's, I think, the beauty of the microdose. Like, it does just kind of pull a veil back and be like, hey, it's not, you are capable. This isn't so serious. Like, here's the road ahead. Whereas, right, like sometimes taking those larger doses is like, it can be a bitch slap that
Yeah.
maybe your nervous system or your mind aren't prepared to handle once you go back to the real world. So I love microdosing as an entry point, and it has so many more purposes than I think people realize. Like, yes, it's great for creativity. Yes, it can help some people alleviate feelings of depression over time, but like, your life is living proof of all of these little ways that it has unlocked all of these codes for you. Mm-hmm. And I like how you talk about frequency a lot. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about, there's a frequency, not a phrase, as you've put it on your website. I want to hear a little bit more about that and what that those words mean to you, because I think that psychedelics, when we talk about psychedelics, we do talk about often a spiritual level of things or a physical level of things. But they always overlap. Mm-hmm. And that overlap is the frequency. Can you share a little bit more about how frequency works and what it means to kind of step into new waves of those?
Yes. Well, I feel like, what I was talking about earlier is that we've been so programmed. I mean, our subconscious was fully formed by the age of 7 years old. So what we consider our thoughts, unless you've consciously rewired your subconscious, are just the thoughts and the programs of society, your parents, your caregivers, your teachers, school, textbooks, the medical system. They're not our own thoughts. And we've been programmed to understand ourselves as very limited beings, because when we don't understand our full potential, we're much easier to control, right? Like, scientists will say that 98% of our DNA is junk DNA, which is just a big LOL to me. A big part of my work is like, yes, I'm teaching people how to nourish their bodies, stabilize their blood sugar, optimize their circadian biology, and open their detox pathways, and all of the things. But ultimately, I'm helping you turn on your dormant codes of DNA within your body, because that's not junk DNA. That is just like all of our unrealized frequency and codes. This conversation could go so deep and it could turn a lot of people away, but I just need to be true to what I believe. I have a very deep relationship with God and with Jesus, but I don't attune to like religious programming. I grew up Catholic. I've unwinded a lot of a lot of religious conditioning throughout the years. And I believe that like God is this ever present universal being infused into the fabric of everything that connects all of us. And it's this creation energy that also exists within our cells. So we have God consciousness in every single one of the trillions of cells in our body. We came here to be creators, and especially as women, like women are creators. Women can literally create life and take a soul from like soul to human, like onto this planet, right? So for me, the conversation about psychedelics and frequency and spirituality is using the medicine, not just as like popping a pill to fix our mental health, like you said. It's not just a physical medicine. Mushrooms are consciousness. And when we can understand that mushrooms are one of the oldest biological beings on this planet that hold the codes of Gaia and of source consciousness, and the mushrooms have survived so many extinctions that other beings have not made it through, right? They're resilient. And when we work with the medicine, we become resilient. We take on all of those codes within the medicine, and we have to co-create with the medicine, right? We have, just like any relationship, Holly in the beginning was like, I hope this is the beginning of a new friendship with Christy. And like, if we want that, like, it can't be one way, right? It can't just be Holly texting Christy. Like, any relationship requires reciprocity. And that's the same with when we're working with medicine like psilocybin. So when we can start to recognize it not only as like the physical medicine that's creating these new neural networks in our nervous system and brain, but like the consciousness and the codes and the frequency of the medicine as well, that's how we're going to get the most out of it. So I feel like the medicine can really help you if you're willing to turn on all those dormant codes within your DNA and access the source consciousness, the creator consciousness that already exists within. So many of us are calling in and manifesting the abundance, and like, we are abundant. The abundance is all around us. It's our, subconscious wounds that are creating the blocks to the abundance and creating the blocks to like how much we're capable of doing. We are capable of like being infinite creators and creating things that we have been told like the human brain is not able to do, right? Like, I'm kind of here, basically, a lot of people would call me a disruptor. And when it comes to the health space, I'm here to teach people that you can heal basically anything that we're programmed to believe does not have a cure. And the same with the way we go about creating our life. I consider myself a Pleiadian starseed, whether or not that resonates to anyone or whether you know what that means. But I believe we're all starseeds, and the Pleiadian message truly is very simple. We came here to be the creator of our own life. So what you are referring to is something that I channeled called Pache Te Sava. And the story rewinds and goes back that actually right before my calling toward microdosing in like 2019, of course, I was going through like a dark night of the soul. And I had been attuned to Reiki level 1, level 2, level 3, master Reiki, all of the things several years prior. And that was a practice that it wasn't like really part of my job, but it was something I really used in my own life and in my home with my dog, with my partner. So in 2019, I was leaning really heavily on my Reiki practice and felt called one day to do a session on my wife. So it was a rainy day. We had nothing else going on. And we probably did like a 2-hour session. And it was so, so, so beautiful. So many sensations happening in my body and her body. And we were so connected. And about halfway through the session, I feel like my body just completely dissolved. I felt a full like Kundalini awakening. I'm sober, by the way, right? I wasn't like microdosing yet. I can feel the Kundalini energy like rising up my spine until I basically like exploded into light. I was just light, and I started singing in a voice that was not my own. Like I can't sing, but it was very beautiful and very angelic. And the words that kept coming through were Pashe Te Sava, Pashe, kind of like in this chant or in this melody. And it sounded much more beautiful than that. And so basically for like 45 minutes, I'm facilitating Reiki at this point, like to my partner, but also it was kind of my own experience. And this foreign language is pouring through me. And it was really just stunning and such an incredible experience. So after that, I knew what that felt like. I felt like I was kind of like birthing through this brand new frequency, but I didn't like logically know what those words meant by any means. So I was involved in a lot of or a part of a lot of spiritual Facebook groups at the time. And I went into one of the groups and I just said like, hey, I just had this experience. Here are the words that were coming through. Does anybody know like what this means or have any insight? Like, no worries. If not, I'm sure it'll be shown to me when it's supposed to. And a few days later, I heard back from this woman who lived in India, and she said, wow, like through my understanding of ancient Sanskrit language, Pashe Te Sava translates to have it all. And for me, I was on the brink, like I just shared, of like moving from this deep place of like suffocating scarcity and perfectionism and smallness and keeping myself small to literally being this massive creator of a life I wanted, which is to have it all. And I think it's okay to claim that, right? Like we did come here to be humans and have a physical experience. And so Pashe Te Sava really became like this pillar of my brand, Microflow. It's something that I would always write in my journal entries. I would sit and just chant Pashe Te Sava, and it would really shift the frequency of my body. A few months later, I was in the middle of a Pashe Te Sava chanting session after doing breath work. And as I was chanting, that's when I got the idea for Microflow. And immediately it was like, it needs to be these ingredients, this dose, the cycle syncing blends, it's the name, exude, surrender, like here we go. And I launched everything in like 6 weeks. So it's a, big part of, I say it's like the kind of like the motto of Microflow. And it's something that all of our customers use as well. I have a 5-step Microflow microdosing ritual, and at the end I always tell them or encourage them to either write Pashe Te Sava in your journal after you're writing your intentions, or chant it or sing it or use it however it works for you. But that is a big part of like the frequency of my blends, and I do every single batch and every single capsule and every single bottle is infused with Reiki healing and the Pashe Te Sava frequency.
I love that so much. I was excited reading that on your site. I'm always looking for, I guess not always looking, but I'm always aware of mantras that feel really tingly and sparkly, and I really love that one. It'll be mulling around in my mind for sure.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It's a good one. That feels perfect. I want to leave on this have it all energy. I'm going to drop all of your links in our show notes so people can find you and follow you, but tell us a little bit about what's on the horizon for you this year. What do you got going on?
Beautiful. Okay. So lots going on this year. I'm really excited. I've mentioned I'm a root cause health practitioner. I spent like 15 years essentially working one-on-one with people, and the last 3 years I work in a group setting now. I have a signature course. It's called Hormone Glow Up. It's helped over 10,000 women at this point. And I genuinely believe it's the most advanced women's healing program on the market. So enrollment for Hormone Glow Up 2025 cohort opens in March. Super excited about that. I just continue to like call in the most incredible women every single year. A lot of them who have become like great friends and collaborators. So Hormone Glow Up 2025 is on the horizon. You can find all the info on my website, christynault.com. And I love facilitating retreats. I feel like it's a huge part of my dharma. I took a break in 2024, but I have retreats coming back this year. I have a patented multidimensional detoxification method that I named Quantum Detox Immersion. And I am now I've personally been doing the Quantum Detox Immersion experience for a few years now, which is a combination of 3 sits, 3 days in a row with combo, followed by colonics each day. So it's like you're really, unlocking all of the toxicity with the combo, and then you go and you flush it all out with a 90-minute gravity colonic, followed by a coffee enema. And then we also sit with every day with Kundalini codes activation. So it's very physical, emotional, spiritual, and so many other things. We'll be working with mushrooms and stuff. So the Quantum Detox Immersion retreats are happening. The first one is in April, and the second one this year is in November. I'm launching a new show later this year, and lots of fun things ahead. There's a new blend coming with Microflow, and just a lot to be excited about.
Cool. Congrats. That's fantastic. I'm excited to follow along and watch you grow. Well, thanks so much for being here today. This was really fun. I learned a lot. I hope all of our listeners learn a lot and are inspired to, unlock some DNA codes and enter into a microflow of their own, however that comes to life.
I love that. I also want to mention, for those of you who are kind of, I sprinkled in some things, but I do have a free microdosing masterclass. So maybe the easiest way to get that, if you want to just DM me on Instagram, podcast. So you can either on my main page at It's Christy Nault or microflow.healing. We can send it from either page, but it's like a really deep dive, 2-hour, all the things about microdosing. So if anybody feels called to learn more of, all of the nervous system stuff and how I see microdosing as such a huge piece, but also one piece of a much larger puzzle, that would be the place where you could learn more.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Holly. This was great.